welcome to the latest edition of the bi-weekly webinar series. This week, we are focusing on roofing and ground mounts. This is part one of a two-part series. In the next couple of weeks, we will have a webinar about the electrical process. But today, we'll be doing a deeper dive into roofing and ground mounts. My name is Mark Lennox. I am the Product Education Manager at Freedom Forever and the host of our bi-weekly webinar series. We thank you for joining us today. We're really excited about this one. Today, we'll be joined by Zach Doherty, who is the National Manager for Project Management, and Brett Martin, who is the Director of Accounts and Sales Support. So let's take a look at the agenda and what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start off this process by talking about the ground mount best practices during the sales process, really how to set the expectation for ground mounts. From there, we'll talk about a ground mount project pre-scope of work and post-scope of work. The majority of the time during this webinar is going to be spent talking about the roofing process. So the very first thing we'll do is talk about evaluating roofs and when a roof waiver might be necessary. From there, we'll jump into Aurora to talk about the options for pricing roofs in Aurora and when to use each particular option. Then the roof pricing and project submission, when to use the re-roof checkboxes during project generation, and how to appropriately price and set the expectation with the homeowner for these projects as well. Last, we'll talk about the roofing process post-site survey, what to expect in Lightspeed and during the process. And then we will jump into that Q&A process with Zach and Brett. So let's get started. We're going to start off today by talking about ground mount best practices. Now, a lot of the information that we're going to share with you is located in the Sales Resource Center. If you do need a refresher on some of these things, many of these documents and information can be found in the documents section of the Sales Resource Center. So when working with ground mounts, it's best to set the expectation early to understand really what goes into a ground mount project. So refer to the adder sheet for the different adder amounts for the different sizes of the ground mount project. There are 3 different size tiers for ground mounts, and each one of those tiers has a different adder. Typically with ground mounts, install times are extended because it requires subcontractors, the gathering of additional materials, there's trenching, possible gravel base or fencing. So it's a pretty extensive build out. Permitting can sometimes be delayed and can often be changed multiple times. So the one thing we do want to stress here is because this is a permanent project, homeowners are not able to complete their own trenching. There are other situations in our processes where homeowners can go out and find their own subcontractors for things if they're not satisfied with the bids. But with ground mount projects, we have to complete the trenching. So another thing we want to share is that locations, those things can't be really promised. They can offer suggestions about where they may want their ground mount, but ultimately there's a lengthy site survey process, and only after that process is complete will we know, based on local AHJ regulations or just where this project is located, what is allowable for that ground mount if it actually qualifies for it. So please keep that in mind. So what happens with a ground mount project pre and post site survey?
Join the Pro Solar.
So a ground mount project's viability
and
is
enjoy
determined during that pre-scope of work stage. So it's important that, as a sales rep, to advise the homeowner of what the timeline and the expectations are. So here's what that timeline looks like for the site survey. The site survey is going to determine the location of the septic tank or sewer system, potential paths for trenching, required setbacks or any local county regulations or AHJ requirements, the soil type, and the landscaping. So here are some of the most common things that will disqualify a ground mount project. Number 1 being HOA restrictions. The neighborhood may just not allow them. Unsuitable ground conditions. It may not be supported by the soil type or landscaping. Existing unpermitted issues with the property. Sometimes a permit will get pulled, or there'll be things that have been unsatisfied. It could be in a flood zone. There's a possibility that the setbacks aren't appropriate. the slope of the property. So you can see there's so many different moving parts to find out if a ground mount project is viable. And that's why it's important to set that expectation, and whatever timelines can be slightly extended when working with a ground mount project. So what happens to a ground mount project after it's been submitted and gone past site survey? And ultimately, it's been approved by the homeowner and we're moving forward. So from that point, it's going to go to the plan stage. That's where the plans are confirmed with the homeowner. Changes after this stage can typically cause some serious project delays. Then the multiple permits will be pulled for the variety of work that needs to be done to complete that ground mount project. They require multiple permits because of the scope and the size of that project. And then this is where generally materials for that project will start to be gathered for install review. There are two types of ground mount installs. They fall into the turnkey or non-turnkey category. A turnkey project is one where the subcontractor that is hired takes that project from the start of the process all the way to PTO. A non-turnkey project means the subcontractor was hired to complete the steps prior to all of the post and rail system being installed. From there, Freedom picks up the work and completes that project and gets it to PTO. So those are some of the best practices and the scope of ground mount projects. And if you have any questions, when we go to our Q&A session, drop those questions in the chat. We'll approve them and do a live Q&A. But we're going to move on now to talk really a deep dive into the roofing process. The first thing we'll discuss when talking about the roofing process is evaluating roofs and roofing waivers. Again, a lot of the information that you see in this presentation is available in the Sales Resource Center. Within that Sales Resource Center, there's a roofing evaluation guide that will help you through the A, B, and C roof process, as well as multiple pages in that document describing the different roof types, materials like tile or shingle, and how to potentially spot situations when you are at the home. So let's talk about the three types of roofs and roof types and how they're graded. The first being an A roof, where no work is needed. That roof is solar ready and the project can move forward. A B roof is where the roof is structurally sound, but Freedom Forever may not feel confident that it will remain watertight for the duration of the 10-year warranty. In that situation, a roof waiver would be needed. There are some examples and explanations in certain circumstances where the roof waiver may not be acceptable because certain conditions will prompt that to move into the C category. A C roof is an unsported or non-buildable roof type, meaning that the roof either needs a partial or full re-roof in order for it to move forward. Now, there is also a decision tree that's included in these evaluation documents. Here's what it looks like. So first, is the roof type non-buildable? The answer is yes. Go directly to C, and then it's going to get a quote for a partial or full. Does the roof have decking? Yes or no? Are there significant structural or decking concerns? Will the penetrations be watertight immediately following install? And again, will the penetrations be watertight for 10 years? That's typically the marking point for whether or not a roof will move to an A or a B. So let's talk about B roofs and when that waiver applies. So I did ask Zach to get some clarity on how many projects typically need a re-roof. And he said, about 11% of all projects that are submitted need some sort of roof work. And about 3% of the roof projects qualify, maybe 2 to 3% for a roof waiver. So what is that roof waiver? In short, roof waivers are for situations where Freedom Forever determines the roof is structurally sound and able to be installed on, but it's in a condition where they don't feel comfortable warranting it for the full 10 years. The roof waivers release Freedom Forever of claims or liabilities that arise due to that damage based on the solar installation, because they determined during the quality check that it's structurally sound but may not qualify for that full 10 years. So that's typically found following the property's site audit. Freedom's team will review the roof and determine if a waiver is necessary. And if that's determined, Freedom will notify the rep that they can go over the waiver with the homeowner, has to be signed in order for that roof to move forward. Otherwise, they'll get a quote for a partial or full. So roof waivers are not allowed in Nevada or some projects in Austin, Texas, or for certain Sunrun projects. Also, roof waivers in Arizona do not completely eliminate the 10-year roof penetration warranty, but rather reduce it to 2 years. So now we're going to talk about pricing models and adders and how that impacts and what to do in Aurora. Roof adders in Aurora, when you get to the pricing estimate sheet, there are 3 options for the re-roof. So you'll see the 3 check boxes here. The first checkbox is a flat price if you are pricing a full re-roof. So you'll include that cost into the pricing of the system. The second checkbox is a price per square foot for all roofs on buildings with solar. So what you're telling Aurora here is there may be additional buildings on site or a detached garage or multiple buildings in the property. You are telling Aurora to price per square foot all roofs on buildings that you're placing solar on. That third checkbox is a re-roof option for roof planes with mods only. So if you intend to do a price per square foot for only the roof planes that are going to have modules, i.e. a partial re-roof, then you'll check this box and put in the cost per square foot to determine what that is for only the roofing planes where you'll be placing the solar panels. So now we're going to get into the roofing process, pre-submission, including pricing models, etc. So roof pricing, what to include and when. So these are some important things to remember when pricing roofs into projects. When you get to this system details screen on the project generator, select the appropriate re-roofs option in the system details only if the homeowner elects for a re-roof during the sales process before the site survey. That is, you've included a re-roof in the sales process, whether or not you know if the homeowner needs one or not. So if the homeowner is unsure if they need a new roof, it's best to set the expectation of potential prices if a full or partial re-roof is needed, but don't include that price in the contract or check those boxes because that will be determined at site survey. If a homeowner does not elect to do a re-roof during the sales process, again, you should not add it to the contract. If after the site survey and quality and estimation team review that and determine that a roof is needed, it will be added to the project. You'll see it on the scope of work and the adders. And then you can go back to the homeowner with the expectation you set prior, saying, here's what it could cost based on our calculations, but we don't know that until we get the survey back. Now you have that information to present to the homeowner. So what do you use to price these roofs and estimate the roof work costs? So again, some keys to remember when pricing roofs into project. Roof prices are different from state to state. So we have a roof work cost estimates sheet that's being uploaded to the Sales Resource Center that you can use as a guide. Again, this is going to give you a rough guide for estimating potential roofing prices with homeowners in the event that they need a partial or full re-roof. If you are including a roof in the initial contract, this can be used as a guide to estimate those costs. So when we talk about pricing roof work, sometimes we get questions about how Freedom's process works. So in order for Freedom to improve the time to install projects that require roof work, they have a built-in policy on how we assess roofing adders. So after months of collecting data and analyzing average costs per region and roofing type, we developed a tool that allows us to confidently estimate the cost of roof work in line with our pre-negotiated subcontractor work pricing. So here's some of the finer points of that. It's a preset pricing. Roof work adders will be priced using the preset pricing internal bid system. Scope of work adders will be generated using these adders prior to receiving the actual roof bid so that it gets added to the project faster. This is for flexibility and speed. So should the bid come back higher or lower than the estimate, the adder will not change except if the bid comes back 20% higher or lower than the preset pricing estimate. So in scenarios where the actual bid is significantly higher than the estimate, Freedom Forever will push back on our preferred subcontractors to lower the bid before adjusting the SOW. So taking all of those points into consideration, if you take the numbers that were given to you from the bid and the adder sheet. If the homeowner chooses to complete roof work outside of the bid provided by Freedom, just keep in mind that that bid cannot be added to the contract. Outside subcontractors can't be included in that the pricing for financing. And opting to do roof work outside of Freedom's process can also add some delays in the process timeline outside by going outside of our preferred subcontractor network. So what does the roofing process look like post-site survey? So here's 3 key images that we've included, some locations where you can find information about the project in Lightspeed. So the picture on the top left is from the pipeline tab in Lightspeed. When you click that and go down to roof work, this is a good spot to check on information about the roof work process, dates that are added, what's going on in the timeline of the roofing process. On the right side, you'll see on the adder sheet that a partial re-roof was added in project review, meaning the quality and estimation team came back after site survey and determined that there was a partial re-roof needed. So look for that in the scope of work tab in Lightspeed under adders. And if you ever need to know where the file is located, if you get an estimate or a bid from the roofer, you can go to the files tab in Lightspeed, and under type project estimate, you'll be able to locate the PDF for the bid that was used in that process. So that wraps up the presentation portion of the webinar. We're going to bring Zach and Brett in now and start bringing some of your questions on screen. Midway through this process, we brought the Q&A up on screen, so we're going to start fielding those questions now. So let's get into the Q&A session. Okay, so now we are at the part of the webinar where we will field questions. We're going to approve some of these that are coming in, and we will send them on screen. Okay, so our first question is, how is the best way to estimate square footage of the roof needing a re-roof? Guys, what do you think? Mike might still be muted.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
All right, so as you talked about at the beginning of the call, Mark, Aurora did just recently release some new pricing tools that allow you to price using square footage. Within Aurora, the tool actually calculates the square footage for you using those adder types. So as Mark mentioned, I'll just review it again real quick. There's 2 different adder types. There's one where you can do all roofs that have solar panels on it, and the other where you can do all buildings, every roof on a building that has solar modules on it. So basically a full re-roof or a partial re-roof. So if you click one of those, it's going to automatically calculate the square footage for you, and then you can use the pricing sheet that Mark referenced that we're going to have uploaded to the Sales Resource Center probably today, if not tomorrow, to basically look at the type of work you want to complete, find the appropriate cost per square foot, input that in the adder, and boom, there you go. Your roof quote is priced.
All right. Thanks, Rob. The next question is, can a dealer / sales rep request to use a preferred vendor of their choice? How do they notate this request?
Yeah, so a dealer specifically is able to submit a request for a subcontractor that will essentially be a partner to Freedom and the dealer on a larger scale, but we currently don't accept requests for project by project specific subcontractors. And in terms of how do we notate that, they're in the sales and dealer resource centers. There's some onboarding guidelines. Essentially, we take these requests via Zendesk from dealer leaders who've approved on their side the request to be submitted to Freedom for onboarding, and then we'll track. It's crucial that it comes in through Zendesk because we track the progress for those onboarding requests through that platform. Once they are in our system, where we database our subcontractors, we'll mark them as a dealer preferred subcontractor, and the PM team will then identify when a specific dealer has a roofing project that's about to go. We'll select that specific roofer for that specific project.
Thank you, Zach. The next question is from Jaden. What is a good response to a customer if they ask why they can't use their own contractor's roof work to add into their mosaic loan? I think Rob, you had that one.
So going off of what Zach just said, I mean, at the scale that Freedom operates today, 30 states, thousands of projects a month, probably hundreds of roof projects a month, it becomes very difficult at scale to work with individual roofers on individual projects. And it's an administrative nightmare for Freedom, but it does a disservice to our dealers, our customers, everybody involved. It's just difficult to work with one-off contractors. And so, as Zach mentioned, we really we take an approach where, for many different reasons, we have a set of preferred contractors. We like to go deep in our relationships. We know they're going to do good work. We can negotiate better pricing. We can negotiate better timeframes. It's not always about the cost. There's many other factors involved. We want to make sure they're legitimate. It's not just a chuck and a truck. They're going to be around for a long time and able to service our customers for any needs in the future. So there's a lot more to it than just price. I know that's not always easy thing to kind of gather and potentially explain to a customer, but for our business at the scale we're operating, it's critical that we work with as few contractors that are good and that we trust and have reasonable pricing as possible. Now, for homeowners, they always can do their own roof work if they want to. They don't have to go through Freedom's preferred contractors and do it through the solar contract. That is always an option. That said, if they do that, they cannot finance it through the solar loan, or they can't have it be a part of the Freedom agreement. All right. So if they want to go and shop around and get a different contractor, again, they're welcome to do that. They just need to let Freedom know, hey, customer's going to complete their own roof work. I'm sure we can get into the more detail and nitty gritty of exactly what that means from a process standpoint, but they're always welcome to do that. It just needs to be completely separate from the solar contract, paid for separately. And then once that's complete, we can come in, do a site survey on the completed roof and then install solar once that's done.
Thanks, Rob. Our next question is from Brenda. I have a roofer for 2 projects that has taken over 3 months now and still not responding when they will do the roofing. How can we avoid this issue? I've been escalating and calling roofing company, but nothing is being done.
Thanks for the question, Brenda. So first off, I would advise not necessarily calling the roofing company, but calling us. I'll start with our expectations. We set the expectation at Freedom's level with the project management team that once an SOW is confirmed, the clock starts ticking, and we should be getting that roof completed in less than 30 days. That's a target, and it's not possible in all markets, pending permitting and maybe some other restrictions that we might encounter. But our target timeline is 30 to 35 days to roof completion. And so if we're outside of that and we haven't been flagged on the Freedom side, then there's a potential issue and in terms of visibility, and we would love that visibility in order to pivot. So we have quite a few subcontractors available to us in various markets, and if a subcontractor is unresponsive or the roof isn't getting completed in a timely manner, we like to be proactive about it, and thus we will switch subcontractors sometimes in order to get it done quickly and more efficiently. But again, if we don't have the visibility or we think things are moving along the way they should be, then we won't necessarily proactively reach out. In some markets, we'll see permitting timelines that will extend, especially post-COVID. There's not a lot of people manning the desks in our AHJs in some locations, and so it's a lot of online submittals that our roofers are doing, and so there's timelines there that will push these out. And if we don't have visibility into that, then we can see these delays. So first and foremost, I would just advise reaching out to Freedom specifically to get an update on the roofing rather than reaching out to the roofer directly. And on these specific projects, if you've already done that, I think we can try to chase those down and see what's going on with those specific jobs.
Thank you, Zach. Our next question is from Chelsea. And the question is, does the PM team assess construction pricing changes regionally to ensure that the pricing calculator is up to date and we aren't providing outdated quotes to customers?
Yes. So the pricing calculators that we use are on a quarterly update in terms of timeline. We update them every quarter, and we're constantly reviewing invoiced amounts versus what we're charging and making adjustments in real time. And the question popped away. Mark, what was the second part of that question?
I will bring it back up. Sorry about that.
Yeah, providing outdated quotes to customers. Right. Okay. So, and then on our Freedom provided quotes, there a 30-day timeline. That's pretty much industry standard from most subcontractors. And so we've aligned with that the quote that we provide is good for 30 days. So, like I said, we will update our pricing calculators every quarter to adjust for inflation and market.
Our next question is from Neil and asks, does Sunrun allow ground mounts?
Hey, team.
So, go ahead.
So Sunrun does allow ground-mounted systems. Don't know too much more detail, or not sure what further detail we want to go in there, but Sunrun does allow ground-mounted systems through Freedom.
Okay. Our next question is from Eric. I think this one is more for Brett. Is there any discussion to allow permit and utility process to begin if customer is using their own contractor without waiting for work to be done?
Eric, great question. So yes, we are currently in the process of looking into how we can allow certain processes to continue while we're waiting on customer actions to be completed. As a good rule of thumb, anytime a project is the only project blocker is some kind of sales action or customer action required, those projects will be moved to holding. But to answer that question shortly, yes, we are looking into ways that we can allow some of those processes to occur concurrently while we're waiting on some other actions to be completed.
All right, thanks, Brett. This next one is from Lewis. I think this one is going to be for Rob. Could you clarify the cost basis for roofing and projects? Is the cost basis the add or cost period as long as the actual cost is within plus or minus 20%? Or is the cost basis always the actual cost of the roofing work?
Yeah, so I think a couple different points that are worth rolling into this question. But in terms of the first question, so going back to what Mark and Zach a little bit were talking about earlier, we for the sake of speed, we take kind of an average cost approach. So Zach and his team periodically review by region all of the roofing costs by work type, and we boil it down to a dollar per square foot for each region and for each work type. And we do that, as mentioned earlier, for the sake of speed. So it's not sitting in project review waiting for roof bids when we know roughly what the price is going to be, and just move those projects along and then get the actual bid in parallel. And so the bids that we produced when we do that, the average pricing are going to be the average, again, the average cost for that roof type in that region. And so that would be the cost of the adder. If it changes plus or minus 20%, as the team mentioned earlier, then we would adjust the adder. But that is the adder. That is the average of what we would expect that roof quote to be. Now, sometimes we don't price it based on an average adder. If it's a certain type of work or something more specialty, we will send that out for bids and have that project, sit in project review until we get the bid back and accurately price it. But otherwise, we take the average cost approach. So I hope that answers the first question. The second thing that I want to tag on here that this question kind of jogged my imagination, I suppose, is when you're pricing roof adders, specifically if you didn't price in a roof adder and you're adding it to the scope of work after, maybe you're increasing the price to a change order. It's super important to make sure that you're factoring in any dealer fee that is incurred on the project. So just to give an example, if you have a $10,000 roof quote, and let's just for the sake of round numbers say it's a 25% dealer fee, you need to make sure that you're grossing up the adder to cover that dealer fee. If you only add $10,000 to your loan and to your contract price, you're going to end up eating the dealer fee on that, and you're not going to have the same net PPW at the end of the day. So, a whole other webinar we could do on scope of work math and solar math, I'm sure, but I'll just say very important that you make sure to take the dealer fee into account when you're adding any adder, but specifically with the adders.
Thanks, Rob. We have a question from Ferris. Do you have pricing guidelines for trenching?
We do internally have some guidelines that we follow in the same way that we're tracking costs for roofing. We are keeping track of trenching costs as well. And so we have an internal calculator that gets adjusted in real time that's regionally based. But those, and I know those trenching costs can be really variable. One of the things that calculate trench costs when they start to be at length, I'll give a brief example. A ground mount trench at 150 to 200 feet in length may require us to use a larger size wire that can be exceptionally expensive. So in terms of like addressing the question of why sometimes are some trenches more expensive than others, something simply put like a 1/0 wire laid in a trench. There are 4 strands at 150 feet at $6 or so a foot, almost $7 a foot for that wire. That's about $4,000 in just wire that goes into it. We have to account for the excavation, what's the hardscape or the landscape that we're trenching through, and what needs to be replaced afterward. If it's just dirt, it's obviously it's a $30, $20 to $30, depending on the length, foot trench. But if we have to go through concrete, that we have to then replace the concrete, and it's a mixture and it's at length, the trenching and excavation and the wire costs can really bring the variability there. So we have access to the material costs and labor costs that go along with it regionally, but it is really variable, and so it's one of those things that we need to be careful in how we quote those most of the time. Hopefully that helps answer your question.
You have to throw out a rough number for $1 per linear foot. Is that possible for you to do, just to give these guys some rough estimate?
Well, I mean, so a range is anywhere from 20 to, and there's a big range because it's different regionally, and I don't off the top of my head know each regional difference, but we're seeing a range from $20 to $50 a foot, depending on the length of the landscape we're going through. In terms of trenching rates right now, typically those trenching costs are a little bit lower when attached to a ground mount specifically, and I think that's kind of given the subject for this particular meeting, a trench attached to a ground mount will likely be a little bit less because the truck roll fees and so on aren't accounted for and aren't needed because we're already there doing ground mount. So it's something else to keep in mind.
Okay, our next question is from Lamar, and it is, how long does it take for a subcontractor roofer to know if they've been approved or denied time-wise by Freedom Forever as far as being a roofing partner once the documentation has been submitted?
Once all the full documentation has been submitted and the contractor has signed and returned the master subcontractor agreement, as soon as that is signed and returned to us, they will get a notification that they are active from our subcontractor administrator. So it should be within 24 to 72 hours of within getting that final completed documentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. Our next question is from Joshua. Can customers make additional requests such as color of shingles and gutters? This is Brett and Zach.
Hey, team. So the answer there is yes. And there's really four primary ways to submit this request to Freedom. The first is going to be at point of sale, where you can input additional notes towards the end. That'll be communicated to account management, and the account management team will pass that info over to the project management team as they build that initial roof bid and then review the roof. The second point in which you can request, those specific roof types or colors is going to be by denying your scope of work once it's presented. You can always deny it and then just leave clear notes on what the request is, what color you're looking for, maybe what roof type we want to change to. And then beyond those two regular milestones, you can always make use of our sales concierge team. You can chat in, send an email in. They can assist with getting those preferences sent over to the project manager, but also go to sales concierge and then get sent over to our project management team. I'll hand it over to Zach to speak to what types of roofs we are able to accommodate, and then maybe how we work with our subcontractors on those colors and other preferences for the customer.
Sure, thanks, Brett. So in terms of color specifically, I think we can stick with that one. I just do a quick synopsis of our process, which covers that. So once the SOW is confirmed, we will send a communication that connects the roofer, the sales rep, and the customer together as like an introduction, and we'll kind of hand the project over to the roofer at that point with the scope and the specs that are required and what we're asking them to complete. At that point, the roofer most of the time, like 95% of the time, will coordinate directly with the customer on specifically what shingle color or roof color in general that they're looking to do, and any other miscellaneous things attached to the roof. So that dialogue and communication can happen at that point as well, if we miss the SOW denial that Brett just mentioned. So in terms of like what roofs can we do, we do shingle roofs, tile roofs, standing seam metal, corrugated metal, rolled roofing, EPDM and torch down. And in some cases, customers will ask to change from one roofing scope to another. And in those, a custom quote and some more custom pricing will typically be requested if we're going to go from something, say, like a shingle roof to a premium metal roof like standing seam. We'll get a custom quote for them, but it's possible. And then the color selection in that process will be selected between the customer and the contractor.
And Zach, curious to know, aside from the color, right, in terms of the roof type, and I think specifically the composition shingle, what is the default in terms of, you hear a lot about 30-year roofs, 50-year roofs. What is the default?
So number one, 3-tab shingles are all but a thing of the past at this point, and in most cases, in most markets, are a special order. Where they used to be the common thing, now it's a special order. So if we're going to try to do a partial and match an existing, it can be difficult at times to find discontinued colors to match, and so I think that's a good point to bring out first. And then what we default to in terms of like a shingle roof specifically is they are all referred to as lifetime at this point, but the warranty from the manufacturer is worded just so it's the lifetime of the shingle. So it's warranted for the lifetime of the shingle. So they call it a lifetime shingle. Typically, what that means, though, that translates to a 50-year shingle at this point. It's pretty standard within the market for most shingles to be 50 years. If not, they'll be denoted as 30 or 35-year shingles. But it's an architectural shingle is our standard, and we go for the lifetime, or that would be the 50 when we're doing a full roof. If we're matching something existing, sometimes you're limited if you're trying to match the roof color to what the manufacturer's warranty on the roof is. So at minimum, it's a 30-year manufacturer's warranty on the materials.
Awesome, thank you, Zach. Next question is, why does Freedom only allow us to mark partial re-roofs in the contract, but not a full re-roof?
That's actually a finance-specific thing. Once upon a time, Mosaic did not allow full re-roofs. They didn't finance full re-roofs, just partial re-roofs. That obviously since has changed, and we've been a little bit slow admittedly to update our project generator. We do have a ticket in with Freedom's development team. We actually were talking with them earlier today about it. They are prioritizing that. So for cash, and I think for Sunrun, you should be able to select re-roof instead of partial re-roof. And then within, we're going to prioritize this one and get it done pretty soon. So I would say within the next week, maybe two, you will have the re-roof option for Mosaic.
All right, our next question is from Kendra. Can we do a shed?
I think it boils down to the structural integrity of the shed, first and foremost. It really can be specific. I don't know, that's a tough one because I'm thinking of my shed in my backyard, which might fit 2 panels. So I think, but in some cases, I think there are some more sheds that are being built, and there's like shed malls on every corner in America, it seems nowadays, and you can put definitely more panels on them. So it would boil down to the survey results, and so sending a surveyor out there to and running it through our structural calcs, I think first and foremost. But let's say it does reach, it does meet the structural calculations and it's fine. I would imagine that we can install on it, but I would have to defer maybe to Rob or Brett on like if we have a minimum system size, because I think that would also, if we have a minimum system size that we can install, that would limit us on what size shed we're able to do.
General answer to the question is yes. There's nothing large shed that, from a roofing standpoint, we would not do. I think to Zach's point, it's a question of are we putting solar on it? Is it structurally sound, et cetera. But there's nothing specifically that would disqualify a shed from being able to be removed.
Our next question is, how competitive are our roof quotes, generally speaking, compared to outside quotes?
So I think it's a good time to bring up some of the databases that we use in order to calculate our roofing costs. And so there are a few market analysis tools that exist. One of which we use is called RS Means. RS Means is an industry standard quoting software that we pay to have a license for, in order to verify and validate market pricing for all of our construction costs, pre-construction costs and project management related costs. That helps us to stay competitive within the market. So I mean, the short answer to the question is very competitive, but we're not perfect. So I know we're definitely going to miss from time to time on some of our quotes, but ultimately, we rely on our historical data, the invoice amounts, and our relationships with our subcontractors, and we have pretty good relationships with them built on volume. The good subs know that they can trust us to send them work and keep their people fed, and so they treat us in kind. And so yeah, within the market, we are very competitive, and in order to also keep our subcontractors honest, that is when we then rely on our third-party market analysis software that we look to validate what's going on. We can look down to a town level or a city level, but ultimately we can keep a little higher level in terms of like state rates that we're seeing. And when and if a subcontractor comes back a lot higher than we think we should see, we absolutely have a conversation with them to make sure that they understand, we're keeping an eye on this. So very competitive.
All right, next question is from Brenda. Let me bring that one up on the screen. Do we have a time frame on how long trenching takes to be scheduled?
Well, we do have an estimated timeline to get scheduled. We typically require about 14 days. That's our target. 14 days to get a scheduled date back from a subcontractor. And then we target the same 35 day timeline, which would be from the point when we can actually move forward with the project to when we get it completed. Now, all that being said, a trench is associated with our permit. And so there may be a delay in the time period when we're able to get a contractor out to the project based on when we receive the permit for the solar back, because the trench is attached to the solar permit. So that will also impact timelines from time to time. In other markets, we just have limited resources available to us. And because we don't have, I'll give an example, there's maybe 40 roofers in Texas that we have onboarded ready to go that we can work with. They may not all be great, and there may be a reason why, we only use 5 of those 40 based on, our experiences with them. But conversely with trenching, we do not necessarily have 40 trenchers available to us in any market for that matter. And in some cases, it becomes really, really difficult to get them out there. And because we have a limited subcontractor base for those trenches, now we're at the mercy of that specific subcontractor in terms of their timelines and their scheduling availability. So we have targets for sure for our team that we try to hold to, but we can only do so much with that, unfortunately, when we don't have the amount of subcontractor support that we wish we did in the given market.
Next question is from Kendra. When we add the roof onto a project, how will we know what the dealer fee will be?
I can take this one, Mark.
Thanks.
So the easiest way to explain it, at least as you're in the field working through these, is you can take, because the dealer fee always has a percentage amount, you can take the percentage of that dealer fee, multiply it by the adder, and then add that original adder cost back in. Is probably the easiest way to explain it. You could also do, if you had a calculator or Excel sheet in front of you, you could do the adder divided by 1 minus the dealer fee percentage, which would give you, that inverse amount. But again, the easiest way to do it, just thinking through it, is take the adder, multiply it by the dealer fee percentage, and then add that original cost back to the output you get there, or the value you get there after doing that calculation.
Appreciate that. So you can also, once you've sold a project, you can still go back to the lead and create another. You can duplicate the sold Aurora design and basically get back to the pricing tool in Aurora on that project. So if ever you needed to, you didn't, maybe you're not as good as Brett at math, and you want to just have the system calculate for you. You can go back to Aurora, plug in the re-roof amount based on the financing option that you selected. It will automatically add the dealer fee on top of the re-roof price that you input there. So that's another a third option if you don't want to do the math yourself. I will put a plug in here too that not on the immediate roadmap, but at some point probably in Q2, we also do plan to get out a net PW, basically a pricing calculator within Lightspeed that you guys can use to price. So it can do all that math for you. So if you want to, it's a $10,000 roof quote. you have a 25% dealer fee. It would calculate that for you. It would take, basically divide the 10,000 by 0.75 and do that math for you. That's a specific example. So that'll be coming soon. We'll take a few months to get there, but Peter Noxious to get there.
All right, so we have reached the end of our question train here for the Q&A session. I want to thank Zach, Brett, Rob for fielding all these questions. Thank you all who attended and asked such great questions.